projected debt service bill by around $5.8 billion over the next 3 years. The revised budget follows newly acknowledged billions of dollars in liabilities that were hidden by the previous government. The revised figures were released during the International Monetary Fund, or IMF, and World Bank annual meetings in Washington, marking one of the most dramatic adjustments to a sovereign debt profile in recent African history. To speak further about this, we're joined on the line by Dr Tafadzwa Ruzive, a postdoctoral researcher in international affairs at the University of the Free State's International Office. Dr. Ruzive, thank you for joining us. Good morning.
Good morning, Asanda, and the viewers, listeners.
Thanks for making time for us this morning. So, from your point of view, does this debt stock reconcile the Court of Auditors' figures and prior government reports?
The IMF is satisfied with the reconciliation that has happened. So, taking our cue from the IMF, we could say that it does reconcile. But knowing the nature of debt issuance and financial emissions that happen in economies, maybe there is still something. There are still some debts that are hidden. But currently, so far as things go, the IMF is looking satisfied with the disclosures that have happened, and thus we can say that it does reconcile the Court of Auditors and the government debt reports.
Is there a clear strategy to reduce reliance on expensive commercial borrowing and to rebuild access to concessional financing there?
There are no clear strategies at the moment. What is on the horizon is the oil revenues that are going to come from the Sangoma oil find that Senegal wants to is exploiting to access more foreign currency and be able to settle its foreign obligations. However, in the same breath, the IMF debts really do not seem to be Senegal's biggest problem, because as a country that is using the CFA franc under a pegged exchange rate regime with the French Treasury, the CFA franc is overvalued, and the revenues that might come out of the export revenues that come out of Senegal are muted, because the exports are not competitive because of the CFA arrangement that Senegal has with France. So while exports and the oil is coming online, the overhang, I think, is that a keen eye should be kept on the administrative structures, the administrative structures that make Senegalese exports uncompetitive on global markets vis-a-vis their ability to settle their external debts. So while Senegal is trying to make ways on the administrative front via the CFA franc and the French Treasury, adjustments may need to be made to make it easier for West African countries to settle IMF debts.
What message should bondholders take from these revised projections? Should they expect restructuring, or could the government intend to defend all contracted terms?
That all depends on, given the administrative structure that I've described, at the end of the day, it seems to Senegal's fate depends on what the French Treasury, what France in particular, wants to do with Senegalese resources. Because as we speak, after Senegal exports, makes all of its exports, 50% of all its export revenue is sent to the French Treasury, where it is helping France where it helps France to overcome its to keep in line with its European fiscal strategy, the 3% deficit and the 3% deficit and 60% debt thresholds. So when you take out 50% of a country's ability to settle its debts, ultimately France is in control here. So it gets cheap resources by making them uncompetitive, it can come and undercut exporters in Senegal, get the Senegalese resources for cheap, and because it controls the foreign currency for Senegal. So that the French interests are very important to understand in whether we are going to get a reprofiling or a reprofiling, or we are going to go. The government is going to stick it out and absorb them and absorb them the debt payments as they come. So it's still very hazy. The clue should be taken from what France needs. And given the riots in France, I suspect that France would really like to keep export prices in Senegal suppressed, and as a result, might actually push the government to defend things as they are, because a restructuring is going to create problems for the value chain, for the exports, for the flow of real goods into real raw materials and goods into France. So under this administrative arrangement, I foresee a defense and to keep the stability of the structure going forward. That's what investors can expect.
Mm. If the IMF debt sustainability analysis concludes that debt is unsustainable for Senegal, what should the government's contingency plan for immediate liquidity be outside of France, a more local or even regional intervention?
Um, outside of CFA denominated debt via the BCEMA, currently there are very few sources. So if the IMF and the World Bank do not have a delay due to these discussions, and their credit card in quotes at the West African Central Bank is maxed out, there could be a period, unless if the oil revenues come online quickly enough, there's going to be a problem with there are going to be some liquidity problems with respect to settling some of their obligations. But the international financial architecture is changing. In the East, we have seen Kenya and Ethiopia transform their loans from US dollar loans to yuan loans. So China is on the prowl, and there might be some sense in getting a yuan line to settle this, if really Senegal is being pinned into a corner, as it is what it seems. I foresee there being wisdom in going for a Chinese yuan loan to refinance the US dollar loan and try and settle these immediate liquidity concerns. Because at the end of the day, the target is to make Senegalese exports and labor super cheap for the benefit of France, their former colonized.
Which social programs might face cuts in Senegal given higher debt service, and what should the country be doing to protect vulnerable groups?
I Fuel subsidies. I had the fuel, electricity, and there are fuel and electricity subsidies that are being targeted for cuts. So those are in the front line, and transportation sector, bus fare, government bus fare and transport subsidies that are going to be cut. I'm happy so far on the plan for the vulnerable in terms of health and education and social support. The conversation is not gotten into those lines. So we are seeing the IMF is moving towards a restructuring of Senegalese industry to try and uh, spare US dollars to pay off this debt. So the vulnerable seem to be off the table at the moment, but industry is going to be going through a massive restructuring. This is under the assumption that much of the energy and electricity and transportation costs are going to affect the business sector and not affect the social support line that Senegal has for the vulnerable and the poor.
Dr. Ruzive, thank you so much again for your time. We appreciate it.
No, thank you for the interview. Thank you.
Our pleasure. Dr. Tafadzwa Ruzive is a postdoctoral researcher in international affairs at the University of the Free State in South Africa, coming with the backdrop of revised budget flows for Senegal from the IMF or the International Monetary Fund and World Bank annual meetings. These are taking place currently in Washington. It's almost time to head over to news. Still to come as we talk of economics on the show. We go to Nigeria, talking about the construction sector there. It's on an upward trajectory. So that's coming up later on Rise and Shine. 8:30 Central African Time. Over to you, Onele, with news headlines.